Call this session to order, and will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next up, changes to the agenda.
Yes, I have a change.
Yes, go
I would
on.
like to add the nomination of Jessica Thurber Boucher to Conant High School, Jeffrey Middle School. I believe it's both the art teacher position,
Okay.
Yep.
And
effective January 10th, I believe.
To start January 10th. Yep. So
Okay.
middle school, high school art position to start January 10th. Thank you.
all right. Great. Any other changes? Okay, so I just want to I'm live, so we don't have to do roll call vote. All right, so we have a motion to add to the consent agenda. I need a second and then we'll vote.
I'll second.
Thank you, Christine. And all those in favor of that change, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain. That carries 600. We've added that to the consent agenda. And I believe we're up to now public comments.
All right, so this is Nicholas Handy, Communications Coordinator and School Board Secretary. On the screen, you should see our public participation policy. So if you want to just read that before you make a public comment, if you could use your first name, last name, and town of residence before making any public comment. And then if you are digital, just use that hand raise feature at the bottom of your screen in order to make the comment. All right, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving now on to the superintendent's report.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, really. We'll start off with some good things. I think that our teams, our basketball teams across the entire board, middle school, high school, are in swing and competing well. I know that our girls won their third straight game. The nice piece about that is they're doing so well. I was able to witness a little bit. They are able to make sure that there's a lot of playing time for all the members, and that's really great to see. I don't always see that in a varsity sport, and so that's really great. And that goes along with our desires to make sure that everyone is being able to reach their potential, be able to get the opportunity to participate and to play and to compete. And if competing is something that they want to do, or to find something else that they're interested in and pursue that. I think that I sent an email to the board. It was really just a forward earlier today, and it was the middle school, high school monthly document that they put out, the Bird's Nest. And I think there are some interesting bits in there regarding some of the 7th grade work with helping students set goals and some data collection that they have been doing. I do know that the guidance counselors, have been in classes today working with the high school students on how to understand their PSAT scores and their SAT score. Well, not the SAT scores at this point in time, but PSAT scores, and where they can go online to even create some plans for themselves to improve in those areas. I think the education committee will at some point talk more about the results of that, New Hampshire SAS and so forth, as we go on through the year. But and if you haven't seen the last education committee meeting, I believe that if it's not online yet, it will be online shortly, and you'll be able to kind of look at that. And there was a report from the principal, the head of guidance, and also the curriculum assistant principal, and it was very informative. So the majority of my report here is just to have an ongoing discussion about what we've been discussing for the past 2 years, it seems like, which is COVID-19. To share some data, that's the majority of this report is looking at data. But we can go over to the overview, the next slide. Yep. So we'll talk about the families and staff surveyed and what they've been saying about COVID-19 regulations, timing, etc. Questions that were different, in the surveys from June, but they were very similar. So just to kind of keep you aware of that, there are about 300 families and a little over 100 staff that took part of the survey. So the demographic information, you can see that, oh, you might not be able to see it from here. Ringe is red, blue is Jaffrey. So that's the number of people who replied, the percentage of the people who replied anyway. And then you'd have a variety of teachers and other staff members who are in those other areas. Some from Massachusetts, Peterborough, New Ipswich, Keene. That's where the majority of the rest of them were from. For those families who reported their children attending, you can see that 117 of them said they had some children at Ringe Memorial School. That's the longest of the lines over there. The next one would have been Conant High School at 104, 100 at the middle school, and then 82 talked about from Jaffrey Grade School. And then kindergarten had the highest response rate, so parents of kindergartners, and the rest were fairly evenly distributed. So a nice mix of at least that type of those types of demographics. This right here is a demographics for staff. Again, the middle school and RMS had the largest number of respondents. The SAU had the smallest number, but you would expect that would be the case. And then the majority were teachers, so 58 teachers, 17 instructional associates, and then kind of a blend of the rest of them. We go to the next one. This is just an overview of the family results. So the question was, how comfortable are you and your family with our current reopening framework and mitigation strategies matrix? And so the blue stands for we need to return to normal, enough is enough kind of idea. Green there is remove the guidance. It's very, very similar to the return to normal concept. 94 there, that number, that 31%, that yellow, that's just keep things as it is. We like what we have. The orange, let's make some temporary changes to mitigate. And the red is we need to permanently make some changes. So not quite cut into fourths there, but a similar distribution to what we had with similar questions last time. We go to the staff, you can see a different type of look where about a quarter would say keep things as they are or return back to normal. So 1/4, almost a half, not quite, said they'd really appreciate having us add some temporary measures to our process. And then another quarter talked about making some permanent additions to the process. So there you can look at it from the standpoint that 75% would like to see something added to what we're currently doing, about 25% saying no. If you combine the results, you get something a little more evenly distributed, where you have the temporarily add and the keep things as is are fairly even, and you would have the permanently add and the return to normal fairly even. Very interesting results, as I think we're so fortunate to be living in a place that really kind of mimics the the country, where we have a lot of that kind of split thinking. I want to go back and say that the last several meetings that we've had, I've really appreciated that the community, when they've given their feedback, has been really respectful in how they've done it, because I know there's a lot of differing opinions and thoughts on all of this this conversation. If we look at staff and family results combined, this is just a different way of looking at that same thing. You would see that for staff, again, the majority would want to temporarily add. And then for the parents, keeping things the way they were was the highest percentage. And if you combine them, like that last one that we looked at, that's what you get. With the majority, it's half and half. If you go from keep things as is all the way to return to normal, that's half, and then temporarily add and permanently add, that's the other half of everyone. So here's just some language. So if you go through it, and I want to thank Nick for really sitting there and tallying these, because this took some time. That out of 134 responses, this is families. So of those individuals who are like, all right, we need to add something to it, you got maximum 75 of those responses that said, hey, we'd like to have mandatory or increased masking. That was a top response. There were some that referenced mandatory masking. Some of them saying do it during the holiday flu season. Others said only those who are unvaccinated, which that's a difficult thing for a school to have to figure out. And then you can see some other responses about remote learning, lowering the threshold of the matrix from 20% to something else, and so forth. You can go to, yep, and the staff. The top response was mandatory or increased masking. Again, there were very similar. And obviously there were fewer staff that answered comparison to the community, but percentages are very similar. 35 indicated that they reference mandatory masking and also around holiday flu seasons, and then some variation in the bottom paragraph, but very, very similar. And then what would you like to see removed? So of those people who responded there, about 73 responded, and mandatory masking was the #1 choice there, 25 responses. These are families. And others wanted just to go back to normal. We're a couple of people who wanted to remove school board authority. So that was an interesting one. I didn't see that one coming. And then staff, you can see there, you have a smaller group of people talking about removing anything, but I think that this removing the 20% threshold in favor of lower, so that's kind of like what would you add in a sense, is very similar to, so it reiterated a little bit of what they perhaps had already stated in another area. And then you can see the rest. So we go with the state COVID data. Not a whole lot has changed in the concept of hospitalizations and deaths and so forth within our age group that we're talking about, our children. We do see from the state side of things over to your right, we see that we hit a peak, really almost double what we had as a peak earlier at the highest point in that November of 2020, where they actually had a couple peaks there. So it'll be interesting to see if this mimics that last one, except that maybe with a factor of 2. So it'll be interesting to see if it goes down, I would say just a tad bit more, and then goes up and spikes back to nearly that high spot and then comes down again. Because if you look closely at that that middle, the middle blurb there, blip, you can see a little up and down motion that looks very similar to the up and down motion over to the far right over there and below. Yeah. So that's where we're kind of watching right now. I mean, it's nice that there's been a little bit of a decrease across the state. Our we've seen steady numbers in our community though. So looking at our local community, our new cases over 14 days has increased since the last time we talked. Our active cases, which is why we, that number, it goes along with the state, have decreased since the last time, at least percentage wise. And our vaccination percentages have gone up by a couple tenths of a percent.
Not significant.
No significance. This is as of Friday. You see that learners outside due to illness was fairly low, except for JGS and RMS, the elementary schools. And JGS is the area where we've had a lot more focus. We'll look at that a little more closely. So this next graph is interesting, these next two graphs. So the orange here is the absent percentage due to illness. So CHS, you can see it peaked out there at about 10%. I don't know as though it's gotten any higher than that throughout the entire year. And then the middle school has gotten closer to 11.5%. I think it has gotten up to about 12% at the middle school this year. And then on that blue line down there, now the numbers, those blue numbers right there, those percentages, those, or the number of cases, I should say, is that percentage? New cases, so it's number of cases. Those right there, they're included in that orange as well, but it's just to show the COVID pieces of the illness. And so you can see here from these graphs that as illness increases, the COVID increases often, or vice versa. As COVID increases, that kind of kicks up the illness. You also see that there's a gray or greenish, that kind of shaded area. That's depicting the masking protocol. So at CHS and JRMS, we had 5 days of masking within the school. And though 5 days isn't a lot to be able to really show impact, we thought we'd take a look at it anyway. And we have about 3 schools that we can look at that from that perspective. So if we look at that, you can see that at the high school, after 5 days of masking, it eventually, a few days after, went down. I don't know if you can show causation there. You did, however, see the COVID cases go down. So at JRMS, you see something that looks a little more promising, that they were on their way up. You started the masking, and then a few days later, you saw a sharp decrease, and then it went back up again. But a little more sporadic at the middle school. Again, however, you see that what is similar in both is that the COVID cases, after a few days, stopped or slowed down. This one, that really low point, that just meant we didn't have data for that day. So you can't look at that and really get anything out of it. And we're in the midst of a masking at JGS. What I can say is that it's following a similar trend, in that if we talked 5 calendar days, that would have brought it to Sunday. And the last COVID case, I reported 4, but I got all those reports on Saturday. So we didn't have any reports on Sunday from JGS, or today, any new ones from JGS. So we kept, I understand, this is part of what our conversation last time. We decided to go through the holiday or for the next 2 days at JGS, because the 5th day was a Sunday. And rather than connecting and trying to just, get the nurse and everyone together and to try to communicate to everyone, unless we had to, of course, it just made sense that we would because one of our issues was we want to make sure people knew ahead of time what was expected, just to go ahead and do the next 2 days. As it turns out, with Saturday's information and with the information of more kids being ill in the one kindergarten class, because some of that information from Saturday was more within that cluster area, and having so few kids, we made some choices for that one class, and that did involve, I mean, we have staffing issues there. And then RMS, we don't really have a lot of trend information. You can kind of see that circle. That's when we had a cluster, like right around there at that 9th, December 9th is when I reported that. So, you know, we would have had information just before that, that someone from the class would have had COVID. Someone probably came off of COVID, while then the next, you know, day we get another one or two, you know, so right in that area, that peak area between the 8th and the 9th, that's when that cluster occurred in the class. But their illness, their absentee due to illness kind of has been on a downward trend in general. And that was a little bit of a blip. We did mask that class.
Okay.
So that class was masked, I think, starting the 9th. So you didn't see any real increase, I guess you would say. What I would expect to see is if you have a cluster, you can mask, you probably will get another 1 or 2. That's what we saw at JGS. It's what we saw in one of the clusters here last time. You kind of had a, you know, it makes sense. It's just that you would hope it would stop it afterwards. So it's a limited amount of information. It's all we have. But there's some questions and some, you know, ideas there that look like they could be promising bits of information. And so that's what I have right now. I think from other things that I personally got out of this was looking at really, if you go back to the middle school, high school one, that's a little bit clearer than the elementaries. Let me go backwards here. Is that at the height of COVID, at least in the middle area there, when we had the clusters, that also pushed the absentee due to illness over that 10% mark. And we can see that our highs right now are not even coming close to 20%. And that 20% mark was really chosen because that was the last bit of data when we had parents kind of saying, we got to close these schools down because we had a flu outbreak and we had 20% of our kids out. So, you know, think about the fact that we've had some tension, and it's usually been around that 10% mark as well, around the 8 to 10% mark. Interestingly enough, that's, you know, something to think about, as some people have said lower the thresholds, some people saying, you know, masking. So we were trying to find out, have we shown that masking, you know, has been able to at least stop the continued? It seems like that's the case. You know, once you hit the weekend, you never know, because we don't know what's going on outside of school. And certainly, and this was what we saw, you know, beforehand, whenever we hit the weekend, people are sleeping over, having parties, doing all that sort of stuff, which, you know, because people are tired and they want normality. So you can't blame people for that. But it does, you know, we can't control that. There's, you know, Unicron is it, I believe is how you pronounce it. I think is going to become the variant that is going to overtake everything at this point in time. I don't know as though it is the most severe, but I think that it is severe from the standpoint of contagiousness. And I know that from talking with some local physicians that they've stopped doing surgeries, and there are a lot of there's a lack of room right now in places. So we're just beginning with this season, kind of a new situation.
So I don't know if there's questions or comments for Ruben. I have something rolling around my head and I'm not sure how to form it. So maybe you guys have one already formed.
So I kind of do,
Okay.
but it's a two-part, mine is a two-part thing. One is I've been feeling for quite a while now that I need to just regularly make a motion that we go to mandatory universal masking. My dilemma is in for how long? I do believe it needs to be temporary. So please know that I do want to make a motion saying we go to mandatory universal masking. Maybe we just want to stop there and have that, because if that gets voted down, then the rest of the conversation's moot. The second part of that conversation becomes when or for how long. And for me, where it goes to is we just got 70 National Guard members into our hospitals in New Hampshire with 30 FEMA paramedics called from places where they might be used elsewhere to come and work in our hospitals. And I know the governor does not want to call a state of emergency, but if it smells like a duck and looks like a duck, I'm sorry. But you're calling in National Guard to come and staff our hospitals because of COVID-19. That's why. This tells me that we are in a unique time. We are heading into a much worse time that's not getting better. Not with anything we're doing. And the truth is in our school, we are not doing everything we can be doing as a school board. You know, we are trying to, but by saying that you don't have to mandatory mask, that's the next step we can do. Our hands are tied on a lot of what our parents are doing and our families are doing. We can't control everything, but we do have the authority right now to say, no, everybody, you have to mask when you're in these doors. And I believe we need to take that step now, at least for as long as the National Guard has to cover our hospitals. You know, I don't have a whim. I know it needs to be more than 2 weeks. And I believe we should start it as soon as holidays end. I don't believe we should tell people tomorrow, but I believe they should know, okay, come January 3rd, we should mandatory mask for a time period. So.
Okay, so is that an official motion or
That-
is this?
That, yeah, I think we have to start with the motion because then the when becomes moot if the motion doesn't carry. So I would like to make a motion that starting January 3rd, we mandatory mask for a deliberated time period per a discussion following the motion.
Okay. Does anyone second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, a second by John. So discussion.
I guess the first thing I'll say is I'm looking at the data. And the data tells me that we're looking at, you know, a very small percentage at any short period of time that's affected by COVID. The top graph is out with illness. And that would include flu and you know,
Broken legs.
anything from chicken pox to upset stomach. So I'm not as convinced that masking has a significant effect on the illness thing, except that maybe it does have an effect on colds and flu as well as a virus. I'm looking more down at the COVID cases. When I look at COVID cases, I see that we're running at 0% for probably more than half the time in GRMS. And for CHS, we're bouncing back and forth between, we're averaging about 1%. We got 2% on one day. And then another day we got 0%. So
Yeah.
from my perspective, I don't see that it's necessary to mandatory mask yet, in my opinion. I'm not seeing the numbers that warrant that.
Thanks, John. Other discussion?
Well,
Okay, Christine. And then Patty.
the question is staffing. I mean, because we understand that the age group of our students, fortunately, and thank goodness, they're not getting very sick. So really what we're concerned about is keeping kids in school in-person learning, which means keeping staff healthy and the staffing numbers up. And that's the crux. I mean, that is the benefit to me of masking, is not only does it keep kids healthier, and so they're not bringing things home to their parents and grandparents who might be susceptible, but it allows our schools to stay open longer. And that's why I'm leaning towards Lisa's motion, but I'm also very concerned about the when it kicks in and when it ends, those timeframes.
Mhm. Patty?
I guess I feel like we were here 7 days ago and made a decision that our administrators are gonna make a decision based on like the boots on the ground, what they're seeing. They're gonna set 5 days. We're gonna try and get past, pieces of this in targeted ways. And as I truly do believe masking works, but I feel like the very specific was the way to go. And I don't feel like anything happened in the last 7 days. I get what you're saying with the National Guard, but our actual numbers, our cases in Jaffrey are down this week. So I guess I as much as I want to debate it, I feel like we're gonna do this. No, now we're gonna do this without any substantial change. And what Charlie's saying is we haven't even given it a chance within the classrooms, within the administration of each school. And we're about to take a break. Maybe we could revisit your recommendation 2 weeks into January. But I'm not in favor of it today.
I guess my thinking is very similar to Patty's, that we have the framework that says, here's when masking should take place and here's how we target it. And yes, we did give authority to the people who boots on the ground that are there saying, we need it right here now. And then they have the authority to do it. So I think doing it blanket, and then that becomes a whole nother layer of things that people are having to enforce. I don't see it yet as a need. This is actually better than I thought it was.
Well, blue are new cases, so they do get cumulative. I mean, so if you have 2 new cases one day and you have 3 the next day, that's actually 5 at the same time. But
what we're seeing at JGS is significant. I mean, the number of cases that have come through in the last 2 weeks is.
we have 17 cases that are active.
And then we have.
Some of them tomorrow will drop off. Some staffing will come back, etc. But that's the number at JGS, yes.
And it's impacted our preschool, right?
Preschool and
our
kindergarten for the most part. Yep, those are the 2.
I mean, that's,
Meaning shut them down for the
yeah,
2 days, yeah.
this is our goal is to keep kids in person.
But it's targeted.
It's what?
It's targeted, like it's specific to that group of people. And then, the mitigation strategy, I guess, is that plan.
But so many of those have siblings in our district. Like, I get that it's targeted, but it's, once you get to the JRMS level, we're seeing it just gets exponential. The numbers are increasing. And
the CDC did come out, just for more information I didn't put in here, because I thought it was another layer. And it's a layer you really wouldn't consider unless you took another step toward masking, which was a conversation around, testing
Test to stay.
So the stuff test to stay in.
Mhm.
So the research, they have, a few studies, limited studies, but they show that test to stay in and quarantine efforts for schools, who don't do that, but do the normal quarantine processes, that their COVID rates are the same, so you're not getting any benefit there. What you're getting is, because they're the same, the benefit is that the people who test to stay in are in
Right.
person. Now, that's a expensive
Expensive.
process, and our nurses we haven't had that dialogue and conversation, but along with that is, if you're going to test to stay in, you got to buy, you have to have parents to buy into the process. Is it testing at school? That means the school would have to get tested. If it's testing at home for, that's an expense to the family. Is it accurately done? It's only for people who are asymptomatic. And then they would also, at the same time, if for instance, someone in their family has COVID, they'd have to mask anyway. So the masking piece is like a essential element to that. Lots of following up. Did you get tested on this day? If you don't do it here, did you get tested? So it's a lot of reasons not to do it. On the flip side, it is a strategy that is being recommended because everyone's having the same issue of kids missing school. So yes, Nick, if you would.
Nick.
Yeah, just to hinge off of what Ruben's saying, just to speak to some of the data that's on the screen. I didn't put together these charts, but based on how that orange line is mimicking, that absence percentage does speak also to the students that are in quarantine. So it's not purely just a sickness number.
Right.
So if we were to
Sickness in
look at
quarantine.
one of these test to stay models, that could take some of those asymptomatic cases that are in that line out of it. I don't have any specific numbers here, but based on the data that I've seen and kind of worked with, there are days that as much as 50% of our kids that are out due to quarantining. And that doesn't say they're symptomatic, asymptomatic or whatever, but it
We're
is
positive for net.
Yeah, and
Well, it might be that they were sick and then they were asked to get tested and then chose not to test. And so they're out during that time frame. Yeah. That's another layer.
Isn't the sibling thing also?
Oh, well, the sibling, but I don't think those numbers are in this
Okay.
one until they become that. I mean,
We
almost,
did district-wide.
I'm sorry, almost 80%. That's a safe number. 80% of siblings or family members come down with COVID when someone in that family is in there. I mean, that's 80 to 85% of our COVID cases. It's just only been recently that we've had things that have altered from that pattern.
John,
Ruben, I was wondering if your report is available online.
not currently, but it will be.
Okay, and is the report from last week online or?
I would have to double check.
Okay.
If not, it's something I can add. It's just a question of working it into the schedule.
Just in general, it's been helpful to be able to, look at that data and compare it to previous weeks, and
Yep.
you can tell you make a lot of effort to make these, so it'd be nice to have access to them. I guess my comment is, I think that masking is probably a good idea. I guess I was in favor of it at the beginning of the year too, but the board was pretty strongly opposed to that, and I figured, well, I guess they've got a reason, and so I don't think I voted in favor of it, but I was okay with the direction we went, basically, support what we've done. But I think that Lisa makes a very good point about the use of the National Guard. And I know we've had some kind of surprising teacher resignations, but I would like to say, at least anecdotally, I hear that there have been some very surprising nurse and doctor resignations as well. That for a lot of hospital workers, dealing with what's happening in their hospitals is very disturbing, and some of them are looking to get out. And then I guess I'll just say the biggest thing that comes out of this report is if 75% of our staff think we should be doing more, then maybe we should be listening to them.
Ruben, you had called masking one of the strategies that's recommended. And I guess where I'm at is I don't understand why we're not doing the least of the recommendations. Yeah, it's beyond me. When we voted for the framework, we were voting on what had been happening and kind of guessing what could happen. We're seeing what can happen. And it is twice, you just said, it is twice where we were at. And it is bad in our area. And we're heading into a flu season even worse, and we have the new variant. I don't understand why we're not doing everything in our power. This seems like such a small thing to do. So we can't go remote. We have to do everything we can to prevent that. Why would this be the issue? I don't get it. I don't.
Okay, other comments or?
Well, I think part of the issue is one of, I'm looking at it from the perspective of my community and the people in my community, the students in my community, and what my community feels about this, not what 70 National Guard people are doing. I think that's great information. But in terms of the action that I take, I need to take it based on the current data that's available for my community and my school district. And from that perspective, I have a lot of parents that are very much concerned about parental choice. And when I make a decision to go against parental choice, then I need to do that based on more information than what I've seen so far. Going to what Patty said, what we've done is we've given some significant tools to administrators. And those tools, when implemented, seem to have some payback. And I would prefer to see how things go. And maybe we do end up having to mask a school after the break and leave that school masked for a longer period of time. But I don't see anything today that would say, I want to go to mandatory masking for all schools, effective now, effective after the break, effective for, a month or 6 months after the break. I just don't see the impetus there to make me vote that way.
More
This is my
comments?
2 cents.
I very much have been hearing our constituents as well. We're both from Ringe, I hear it as well. But every meeting, every survey, I'm seeing half and half. I hear that there's people who don't want universal masking. I'm also hearing there's a lot of people who do want universal masking. So I'm not seeing that by doing universal masking, we are going against one of our towns or both of our towns. There's plenty of people who want this. I think we've tried it without it, and it's not going great. We are certainly not going in a positive direction. I think we need to do everything in our authority. And this is part of it.
We may not be going there yet. Okay, I'm not saying that it may not happen in the future, but today, parents have a choice of sending their child to school with a mask or without a mask. So that's their choice. What you're saying is you want to take half the people and mandatory force them to wear a mask if they choose not to. And I'm saying, I will go there, but I need more information and more data than what I have up there. So that's me.
Can I?
Lisa,
We're
and then
close enough,
John.
I can do this.
One quick,
So
and then
the-
John.
Okay, okay. Part of the issue with the masking, I think, is the idea that by wearing a mask, that it protects you from everything. But the truth is that the mask protects other people. It doesn't protect you. You're still breathing in everything in the air. You're breathing in all of the illness. This mask is not keeping anything from me. What it is doing is if I cough, I'm not going to get somebody else sick. So that's great. I'm not going to get you sick by wearing this mask. That doesn't mean that I'm not breathing everything in. It's not keeping anything of that out. So I want to protect our kids as much as possible from this. I don't want them getting sick at all. And if that means making sure that everybody doesn't cough on somebody else, please do that.
Ruben, I just had a question. What kind of data do you have on the level of masking? I know you've been recommending that people wear masks pretty much constantly since the year started, every time you report. But what percentage of our students are wearing them?
So at the elementary school, you have 100% of your learners who are wearing them when they are within 3 feet. So transitions, I went to like I'll give you an example. Rindge Memorial School Thursday and Friday, but Thursday in particular, I went into a kindergarten class. They were in reading groups. They all had them on. So that sort of thing. I see that as well. But there's a whole lot more movement in this building. So there is more, individuals with close proximity who are not masked. I think the masking percentage here is low in this building. Adults, it's very high. And kids, students would be, if I were to estimate, no more than 20%. So perhaps 15%. So here's a lot higher percentage of individuals who aren't.
Right. If there's no other, then let's take a vote on the motion, just to remind everyone, the motion was mandatory masking starting when we return from break for a period of time that hasn't been determined. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right?
All those opposed, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Or actually, nay. Sorry,
Nay.
nay. And abstain. That failed. I think the count was 2 to 4, but I'm not sure.
I didn't hear Christine vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I voted against the motion.
Okay, so, all right.
Sorry, you can't see the lips.
It
moving.
is-
I know, it's like really hard.
It is harmony, so.
Okay.
I have, so my question, thank you, Ruben, for your information here. I'm still pretty uncomfortable with the plans that are established for information for students when they return from a quarantine or an illness, in terms of lost class time, lost instruction, lost worksheets, lost. I don't know. I think there's a big gap between those kids that are asking for the information while they're out sick or quarantine, what they're getting for the teachers, and a huge disparity across all the grades. And I'd like, after we get back from break, to have someone provide real context to what is actually happening.
Mhm.
I know we can't do it for all the classes and all the grades, but I just am pretty concerned that I'd be curious,
Mhm.
term 1 to term 2, the academic impact of the lost class time. And I've heard about it from different parents, that there's just crickets, and I can appreciate that the teachers can't follow up with every student that's out. And I'm just afraid that we're backsliding significantly in a number of different areas. It doesn't feel very, I don't know, secure. It feels very insecure. And that part of it.
Mhm.
How are we delivering instruction for those who are out either with illness or quarantine
Mhm.
in a way that they're not truly losing ground?
Mhm. Mhm.
I know that's different for every kid, every class, I know I just don't know how are we delivering that academic experience.
Right, if there's nothing else relating to the superintendent's report, we'll move on to consent agenda.
Sure.
Okay. All right, I need a motion then for the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you, Charlie.
Second.
Thank you, Patty.
The easy one.
Yeah. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Raise your hand. Oppose, abstain, that carries 600. Thank you. Moving on, we have warrant articles discussion.
So I think, we could go a few different ways here, but the one that I wanted to bring up was, well, I guess two, and John is, although he's on vacation right now, is currently having someone work on one of these. So the one that I'm having him work on is the difference between, as we talked about, splitting up the warrants, a bathroom at 1.8 million, and then the bathrooms up to 3.1 million, around there. What you're getting for one, so that you're aware, and what we're getting for the other one. So that's being done as we speak, so that we have kind of an informed idea of what's happening or what we want to do. The other one is, we were, after having a conversation with Carrie, myself, and John, and even as I was listening here, I wasn't really personally for a lease for doors and windows as a separate item for a couple different reasons, but one is that I thought it might be better for us to, because we were also talking about getting the maintenance reserve fund into a good healthy spot, would be to use the maintenance reserve fund for the windows and the ADA door elements, as opposed to getting a lease for that. I don't think the amount of money is worth a separate lease.
Right,
Right.
yeah,
That makes
and it
sense.
has to get done. There's just.
And well, but also when you put it into that warrant, you have a little more flex time with the time you get it done. So if you can get it done, obviously your goal is to get it done during the summertime, but hopefully we'll have other things going on at that time as well. And materials may be on short supply as well, metal for doors and so forth. So aluminum. So being able to, those types of things can be done during the school year, for instance. And so having a little bit of a leeway. Windows perhaps can't be. Windows should be done during the summertime, but if for whatever reason we get one school done and not the other one, we still want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought that I had, that it would, convey to
Use
the
reserve.
community that our goal is really to put the money into that, and then with the
From that
understanding, yes, we do use it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm writing notes. for
That way
myself.
you're limiting the number of lease warrants out there.
Yes, that makes sense.
So do you have no numbers on the HVAC and the plumbing, if you split them up?
I don't have exact numbers. The HVAC. Yeah, I mean, I had those last time. Let me think where I'm at right now. Yeah, the plumbing was between 1.8 and 3. It was whether we wanted to go, because we talked about what's, if we have one shot at it.
Yeah.
Do you want to go for more? But I understand that. I also wanted to make sure that if we're getting a lot for 1.8 and then suddenly we're not getting that much more for 3,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we have listed what we're getting for that. And so that's why I asked him to get that spelled out so we would understand clearly what that was. Because there's a big difference between 1.8 and $3 million. And so you want to see that equal difference within the quality of the work that you're getting done. Whereas the HVAC is, you got one number.
Yeah.
And that one, again, I mean, I can find it out easily enough. Yeah, I just have to, it's in my emails and so forth.
Well, and not all.
While
the
you're
bath-
talking, I can,
Not all the bathrooms are the same. I mean, like to renovate, say, the middle school bathrooms may be very different, just in terms of the scope of the size and the entrances and all the other stuff, the walls and the structural pieces that go to it versus single off bathrooms here, for example, or something.
Yeah, I know in the middle school, we talked about, because when I walked around with the architects, we talked about in some cases having to move walls and
Right, exactly.
everything else because of the access and privacy and being able to get them in and have them truly be ADA compliant. And
I think the details do matter. And for the deliberative session, we'd want to actually have schematics and stuff to
Yeah.
actually describe. I fully appreciate John's photographs, or I should say, or Nick's photographs that John showed, whoever's photographs, but
Yeah.
really shows what we're looking at here in terms of our conditions.
it looks like the HVAC work would be $4,065,000. Give or take 1,000. But the Jaffrey Middle School says replace 7 units with dehumidification and hot water coils, etc. would be $1,176,000. Replacing the electrical services for both the Conant High School and Middle School would be $475,000. And replace all units with ducted dehumidification units with ERVs at the high school, $2,414,200. Yeah, 250.
and that's how you got that.
Yeah, I added those 3 numbers up
Okay.
to get that. And I'm looking at the rest of the stuff that they gave me was just bathroom upgrades. And it just kicked me out.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, is there any thoughts about those 3 things right there? The bathrooms, the windows, doors coming from the reserve, and then what we just talked about in the HVAC. Is there anything here that anyone needs?
I'm just a little confused. Okay. I'm looking at. what- All right, I'm looking at 15-year lease at 6.5 mil. Numbers I have from Terry, tax rate of 37 cents per range and 49 cents for Jeff. When I add up the 1.8 and 4.1, I come to 5.9 mil, which is less than 6.5. So I would imagine that those numbers would come down. Now, they may go up a little bit if you split it, because I don't know how that's gonna. If you're talking individual leases, the numbers might be different than a single lease. So I don't need the numbers right now. I know what it's gonna be less than. It's gonna be less than a combined 37 for range and 49 for Jaffrey. So if we're going for 5.9 on a 15-year lease, split it up. I think it'd be more amenable, but it's not gonna be terrible.
So say again, what was the range versus and the Jeffrey?
Well,
If
first off,
The
ballpark.
5.9 would have been the 1.8
Eight
million for the bathrooms
and
plus the 4.
HVAC.
4.1 for the HVAC.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So if we split them up, it's 5.9, but the numbers that I was given from Kerry
Mhm.
is a 5.1 and a 6.5,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
So it's greater than 5.1 and less than 6.5. So that means it's gonna be less than the two together. It's
Mhm.
gonna be less than 37 for range and less than 49 for Jaffrey. 49 cents.
Per thousand, on the 1,000.
So I think when we get the real numbers, that's what I'd
Mhm.
support that in the warrant article.
Right.
1.8 and 4.1.
4.1.
Yeah, we do need to see what the difference is and what that impact would be.
And Charlie, you're talking about that as two warrant articles or one?
Yeah, I'm looking at it as two warrant articles.
What about,
Because I think that's significant.
as long as we're doing them separately, is there a reason not to add in the doors and windows as a third?
The reserve, I think
How much
Ruben
how much are
outlined.
they? I mean,
Well, John last time estimated $1,450,000 for the doors and 550,000 for the windows.
Well, Ruben had said the idea of doing it with the reserve and outlined things around timeframe due to materials and work and weather, and that seemed a smarter approach to it, to
Well,
fund
and
it
you
through
have it, and
that
you have it paid off faster.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea.
and not do a lease on that.
And maybe that's over 2 years as opposed to 1 year, I don't know. But that was the thought process, rather than doing 3 leases.
Yeah.
And trying to combine them all. And then pay them off at different, because you can actually, pay them off
Pay them
at
off,
different
yeah.
rates, yeah.
Sure. Could you just say that again? So instead of doing that, you're talking about putting. them-
I'm saying, yeah, we should focus on the ADA, the doors. First of all, I think we can find money this year to handle the most needy
Sorry.
doors. So we're looking into that right now. The other piece is, but certainly not for ADA purposes. That's a lot more expensive. So then for ADA purposes, and then also the windows, looking at, let's populate let's put money into our reserve fund and have that go toward those areas.
And then it could be distributed as needed when available, blah, 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 blah.
That sounds
That makes
fine.
sense.
That sounds, yep.
And then it's also not a no means no type of situation. I think that was the other piece. If you
Yeah.
do a separate lease for that. I mean, let's put it this way. We do a lease for the HVAC. If no means no, well,
We don't get HVAC.
we're
We
not
don't have
getting
the money
HVAC. I
anyway,
mean,
so
it's not, yeah, I mean, unless we have an emergency situation where we have to replace something. Bathrooms, the same thing. But for windows and doors, you might be able to, that might be a problem.
Mhm.
So
Right.
more for the doors probably than, that means you can't get any of that. You can't do anything.
Mhm. Yep, I walked up to
And that's lower hanging fruit that could be done.
JGS today and over by the office, there's a note taped on one of the doors
Yep.
saying, do not use this door, it doesn't close.
Yeah.
And that's you don't want that kind of thing at any time, but especially during the winter.
Mhm.
Where that
These
doesn't
doors are 30
close.
years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about a means of exit during a fire?
Well, I thought about that, but they're saying the door doesn't close, so hopefully it opens.
You get out.
Yeah, it closes, but it doesn't close like
tight.
I went
automatically.
through that door just to see, because I read the sign.
I'll challenge that.
And I chose to go through the door anyway, because I wanted to see what was up with it. And yeah, you have to physically make sure it's latched. Yeah. So it closes, but not if you just let it,
It, not on its own,
not on its own.
like it should.
Yeah.
Ours is broken or something. Right. Okay, any other thoughts on the warrant articles and what we talked about here?
We have a number for JRSSA. No. We don't know for sure what that number is. It's a one-year number, so.
Right. What I have right now is I believe the board is interested in having one for the JRSSA to improve the
Higher ability.
hireability, there. I don't know if we've talked enough to land on that final number. I'd be hesitant to say that.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think that, am I correct that we want to see a warrant?
Yes.
Well,
that
I
as
think we
well.
need to put it
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
before the
Yeah,
people. Let
absolutely.
them decide
Okay.
whether they
Yeah.
want
Yep.
to do that or not.
And again, being very clear
Mhm.
what's at stake.
Because what we have is we've had some conversations with the association. We've had further questions within this group right here as to what if. So I think I need to get some information about the what ifs.
We good with that so far then?
I'm sorry?
We're good with those, what we've said so far then, with the warrant articles at this point?
I am.
Okay,
I don't have it in black and white. but I think
no, it's not black and white, but we're
I think our
headed.
conversation,
It's discussion. All right. And if we're good with that, let's move on to board committee updates. So facilities,
Don't have an update for you, not since last time.
okay,
We spoke about possibly meeting, but this week didn't turn out to be a good week for a variety of reasons. We have a need to prioritize our projects to see what's going to be done in case these warrant articles don't pass. I think Charlie was the one who pointed that out, requested that prioritized list. But I think that our first goal, starting the new year, is going to be to develop our messaging for why these things are needed. We know people are going to be hurting. Taxes are going to be hard, and it's inflation is pushing salaries. This is a separate issue almost because it's old buildings, but it all comes out of the pocket. So we're going to have to talk to people, and hopefully that'll be the focus in January, to do our messaging, try to be honest with people and also clear. So,
okay. Thank you. Finance,
we followed facilities lead and we opted not to have a meeting this week. Or
I
actually
know.
last week.
I have to say, I had a panic. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be at a meeting. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, no, not. All right,
No, there was not significant work that we could do until
No.
we got the budget.
until the
resolved.
budget, yeah. So kind of a lot of the meetings we're having, like one that we had last week is finance, so. Education, so we met on the 9th, and so last week at our special meeting, we briefly mentioned that, but since this is our regular meeting, I wanted to mention it again, that we had the education committee meet, and we had presentation from a high school team, and they talked about the different pathways, the STEAM and STEM pathway, talked about the construction trades, and then also just that they've got you know, a kind of format for if you want to develop a pathway. Here's kind of like fundamentals this year, and it kind of outlined exactly year by year what the components would be, and then you could fit in whatever your subjects are for that. We talked about the program of studies and scheduling, and talked about the New Hampshire Scholars and kind of like the components that would be in that. And again, this will be, if it's not already, online.
Yeah, it'll be on, I'll hopefully get it up tomorrow because I'll be working on this
Okay.
meeting getting up too, so.
So one of the things, though, I have to say, was really excited about the programs, the studies, and the scheduling, is that by the end of the year this year, before kids leave this year, they will know their schedule for next year. I know that's always been an anxiety of kids and parents, like, you know, when are the schedules coming out? When are the schedules coming out? And, you know, Fast and Furious in August, people are doing that. So they're hoping to have them ready May, so that they've got more or less the month of June to kind of work out any kinks or concerns that people might have, so that that's all settled before they leave, which I thought, oh, how brilliant is that? So that's a really positive thing. We also talked about a social and emotional program. And one of the things that we had was college and career readiness and a college bound day, which was really cool. And that kids came together and they worked on their applications and sent them in. And actually one student heard back before the end of the day and that they were accepted into this program. It's like, oh, how is that? That's great. So anyway, that was really, really nice to see. And then we also heard a little bit about the professional learning community and curriculum instruction. And I will say that next month, the focus is going to be more on that kind of social emotional program that we're working on with David Fraser, right? What's his name? And then, so that will be in January. And then in February, it's going to be looking at professional learning communities. At least this is the plan. Professional learning communities across the district and kind of what's happening. What's it look like at the elementary? What's it look like middle school, high school? So that was the education committee, and you can see it live and in person. Well, okay, maybe not live.
Not live anymore, no.
No, not live anymore, but and you won't be in person either because it's a video, but you know, it'll be there. All right, so policy.
Policy has not met. It will not meet this month either.
Okay,
It
you
will
taking
meet
the lead?
in
of this?
January.
It's been
Well,
fun.
yeah, I'm not sure who picked it first, but yes, there's work behind the scenes, but not in committee, so.
Got it. Great. Okay, thank you. Goals. The goals is kind of following what's happening with the strategic plan. So as that gets more developed, we will be able to become more developed. Communication, anything? Nick, did you have any meetings?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
Hoping to find some time to schedule something at some
Okay.
point.
All right, thank you. And wellness, was there?
We haven't met.
Okay.
We're taking it.
Last time I forgot to include you, so I'm really
Yeah.
sorry. And I
think
wanted to
we
make
said
sure I did
the
this
end of
time.
January, right?
Sounds right.
Okay, great. Well, we'll check in then. Okay, we're back to public comments.
All right, I'll pop the public comment policy up real quick. So again, just make sure you're familiar. If you would like to make a public comment, use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and then we can acknowledge you, first name, last name, and town of residence, please. All right, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, thank you. Board matters. Anyone have anything? I will say I noticed that an email went out today. I don't know if y'all looked at it or not, just about legislation that's upcoming. Might want to dig deeper into that. I kind of glanced, I didn't have a chance to dig in, but I certainly intended to, 'cause looking at some of the headings, there are some things there that we should be aware of, I think.
That's the New Hampshire School Board Association. No?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any future items? Okay. Then I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Second, anyone? John,
Second.
thank you. Hattie, John, thank you. And we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.